Good afternoon, or evening. We are starting today with a workshop. I believe we have Chief Stockdale to present the findings of the Fire Station Subcommittee. Some subcommittee members behind him.
Yes, and, our architect is caught in traffic, so he'd be here with, as soon as he shows up, he'll have larger scale photos with dimensions and dimensions and different things to have for that. So basically, the whole purpose of tonight is to just kind of update you to where we are, how we got to this point, and some of the things that we've talked about and went through to get to this ultimate kind of recommendation to where we are. So currently the active committee members are myself, community member Dennis Terrio, Harry Milliken, Ray Harilla, that's it. I can never pronounce that correctly, and Councilor LaJoy. The committee has quite a bit of technical expertise with Harry with systems, HVAC systems and specific things. So we all have, everybody had a good breakdown of different sets of skills they brought to the committee itself. So basically to start, in your packet, you do have a table of contents to kind of follow along with. And it's going to basically go through kind of our whole kind of process. For example, building orientations, that's the first thing we did. We basically sat down and with the architects and we looked at where on the site do we want the building? How do we want it kind of oriented onto the site itself? At that point, we had three options, A, B, and C. And you'll see in your booklet that, page 1 through 6. And ultimately, we chose, we felt best the layout and the site orientation was option C for us, and worked better for us in that way. Then we started to look at our space and needs kind of analysis. We took what Mitchell Architects did prior to, and we then kind of started talking about where we are in operations, where we are as a city, some of the things that we wanted to make sure that were really put into this project. Some of the things we come up with, where we really wanted to look for modern operations, ability to expand. We are looking for a 50 to 75 year building with this. Very key point was a neighborhood fit. We needed everything to be safe and efficient, and the ability to grow. We also wanted it to be cost effective in the systems, the design, and the layout. So we want it to be kind of the feng shui of everything we need. We need to minimize travel time. We need to make sure that it was comfortable as possible, but the rooms were efficient, multi-use if possible, able to expand, needs for computer, for study, for systems, for training what we could. How do we want the site layout so firefighters can get into the bays as quickly as possible? What type of feel did we want in the station itself? For example, the homey feel, what were we trying to have happen, the camaraderie, the things that, we felt in the traditional firehouse were important. So with that, after we chose our point C for the orientation, we come up with a couple layouts, and you'll notice the layouts in your packet will be basically page 7 to 18. In that packet, we came with three layouts, C1, C2, and C3. Okay. When you look at your packets, I believe it's 7, 8, 9, 7, 8, 9, 10 are kind of the like 4 pages apiece for each layout. So the first layout generally shows where on the site it's located. The part 2 just kind of shows the parking and some other smaller pieces. The third page will show kind of the layout within. In the fourth page, we kind of wanted to find out what type of roof construction and level we wanted, whether we wanted a flat roof, slope roof, multiple angle roofs. So with that, we looked at all the different layouts, A, B, or level C1, C2, and C3, and what we come up with that best suited the needs and best suited kind of where we wanted to go with the station was option C3, which turned out to be is a 3-bay station. And then once we figured that was kind of that was the size and the dimensions that would best meet our needs, we started to move down the road of tweaking that design. So as we move past that, and you'll see, I guess, after that C1, C2, and 3, there's also initial cost estimates attached to that. Those haven't been tweaked. Those were just initial cost estimates. Also included in that is a kind of a narrative of what each kind of design included and held. That starts on page 19. So for example, bunk rooms, lieutenant's office type, we wanted a study room, kitchen, dining, day rooms, fitness rooms, unisex toilets, storage, IT, decontamination, appropriate storage for EMS supplies down the road, making sure that we keep all kind of the latest safety kind of pieces in mind. For example, things that are out in the bay, turnout gear, trucks, all those things are very separated from the living quarters, and to make a separation between those, and to make sure that separation stays. So all the dirty things stay out in that dirty section of the building and don't get transferred in. If a person has to be or is dirty, there's a decontamination section where you kind of step your way through, where you go from the bays into the living quarters. You clean up on kind of each zone, and you end up in the living quarters in a clean environment. So all the different things that we wanted to make sure that we included. The next piece to this, as we started to pursue on page 23, is basically we liked that design of C3, the 3-bay station with that layout. So we had some drawings done of a 2-bay and a 3-bay option. So we were able to take a look at what the costs were, what the size differentials were, and kind of put together, does this meet what we want to utilize it for? So as we looked at this, we decided that we would still stay, even with the 2-bay, we'd stay with the 3-bay option. It did continued to meet our needs better. So we went to a version 4 and 5 of this. So it's basically the 3-bay station that progressed to two additional versions with other tweaks that we made, layouts, do things work better or not? For example, where's the turnout gear room located? How do we build the decontamination rooms, the layout of the bunk rooms and size? Where do we want the day room, kitchen? How did we want to tweak those? And ultimately, we come up with version 5 is the ultimate kind of end point for us. One of the things we came out with for this is how do we efficiently utilize our space? If, for example, we wanted C5 would be our recommendation. The initial look at C5 had large mechanical rooms and some other things on the first floor for us, which took up a lot of space and made other rooms a lot smaller and not as efficient as what we would have liked. So we know with the sloped roof concept that we were able to add a mezzanine to the bay area and move the electrical or the mechanical equipment and those kind of things up into the mezzanine area, as well as create additional storage for different things up in that area as well. We had that area accessed with stairs up and down from the bay area, so we didn't have to go through the building to make anything, keep that dirty, clean kind of separation. This mezzanine did not take away from the space, so it allowed us to keep the space we needed for growth, as well as took a lot of the mechanical pieces away, which allowed us to more efficiently utilize the single floor of space that's in our core kind of area, which has allowed us to, for example, with this final recommendation for the C5, there are 6 bedrooms, but those 6 bedrooms are large enough to be expanded to 2 beds, so we can fit up to 12 firefighters in the station for any type of expansion. So it's certainly more than adequate to meet our needs. Day rooms, study areas. We had some other options about adding a community room potentially, and it kind of exponentially kind of increased the cost for a lot of this. So we really tried to focus on what do we need for a substation and how do we need to lay this out. The ultimate C5, if you'll look, it's page 32, is our final kind of our piece and our recommendation to this. Where if you kind of look at it face on where you're looking directly at the dorm rooms, this to us was a good setup. The firefighters park out back. They're able to enter the back of the building directly into a vestibule and go right to the bays or to the living area. It's set up for a fitness center, the fitness area, so those off duty can utilize it without disturbing a whole slew of other things. The bunk room, study room, the main entrance will be over there where it says VEST1, right near the study room and where the most kind of people in action are for the day if anybody is coming to visit. It's set up so that we can have turnout gear, entrance where we need it, storage, yard storage, things we need on the other sides. It's a drive-through system. We did shrink the bay size. Originally they were 80-foot long bays, which we didn't necessarily need, so we were able to shrink them to 60 feet, which would more than adequate for our largest vehicle that may happen to be there. So we were able to address some of the size and cost through that piece. So it made the bays true actual drive-through bays, which is really what we wanted to have from the beginning. As minimal backing up of an apparatus as possible is what we want. So the ability to continue a drive-through. The backside is also set up a bit so we can do some training. Have a little area for us for training for different types of things. It certainly isn't a training facility, but it'll allow us to do a couple other things. And there'll be some things built into the station that will allow us to do some interior training. So this size of a station, no matter what we do, I believe is right where and offers us the best opportunity and most efficient kind of space we can set up for this. Page 33 is a mechanical room, and that's where you'll see the mezzanine and mechanical room, so it does allow us that storage. And then we can go to page 34 and look at some costs. One of the interesting things happened as we looked on or started addressing this issue, looking back at Mitchell, the architects, and the cost estimates. It seemed that somewhere along the line, the soft cost part of this wasn't put in anywhere. So it was kind of assumed that that was just part of the package, but it's not. So what ended up happening a little bit after a little bit of shock was, now how do we address this? And at that point, the committee sat down and said, all right, what parts of this design can we adjust? That's when we made the shrinking of the bays. That's when we added the mezzanine and decreased some of the size of the rooms. We tried to get things as efficient as possible and as small as possible inside the building that would allow us to kind of effectively function, as well as keep the idea that we wanted that increased storage space, that increased expansion ability, or ability to expand in the future, whether it be rescue trucks, whether it be hazmat, whether it be a boat, whether it be, you know, as we move in a 50, 75-year building, you know, we thought, how do we, you know, do we need an 80-foot bay where it's really, in theory, you know, 6 bays, you know, because 2 front and back would be considered kind of full bays. So we're able to shrink those down and utilize them more effectively and say, okay, we're, you know, what do we need and kind of what we don't. So that did drop our costs down some. If you look at this kind of sheet here, we ended up with 11,383 square feet, and that's with the loft as well. So we looked at this and said, you know, what is the city's ability going to be for this? Because some of these services and some of these soft costs are just allowances. So we needed to look at what, as a city, can we take on and are able to accomplish ourselves to try to increase the savings as much as possible. So on page 36, I did a comparison for the recommended option C5 bay. The original numbers that were on that first sheet from Context Architecture are on the left column, and the right side column are some of the things that we discussed. I spoke with Dale Dowdy, I spoke with Craig Starr, Louis Turcotte, and other staff members to try to come up with things of what was going to be the cost and how could we effectively do some things. So, for example, design and engineering itself, the site itself is less than 3 acres, so there's a lot of permitting and a lot of things that we don't need to do because it doesn't meet or meet a specific threshold. So we're able to kind of take care of those things ourselves for the SLOTA, stormwater, and natural resources permitting. Traffic studies, we don't necessarily need one. We started with a traffic analysis. I mean, generally 90% of the time our trucks are turning left, and we know that. So we kind of know where things are going. It also doesn't meet the threshold to the amount of calls that that station generates doesn't meet the threshold to trigger a traffic study to do that. Professional services. Oh, so in that one section, we were able to decrease it by about 5.5% or $26,000 doing those certain things. The professional services piece, OPM, clerk of the works, we were able to decrease that amount by $25,000 after discussion with.
Sorry, it just says items in red, but the counselor is colorblind.
Yeah,
So
I want to make sure I wasn't missing
I'm actually colorblind too, so I just happen to know I wrote it.
it's
So
all in black on ours.
I would say anything that's not the same number as the other one.
Sorry
so,
about
yeah.
the disruption.
I'll try to mention what they are on the left side so you can see which ones make it easier for you. Yeah, I didn't think of that because they look the same. They look gray to me too. So I guess so. So the OPM clerk of the works, we did drop by $25,000. The MEP commissioning piece, our buildings individual, Louis Turcotte, believes that that's something that we can take on ourselves due to the size of the project. He felt pretty comfortable with that. Construction testing, we did drop by $10,000 because there already is some testing done in some other parts, and we also took information of what we've been paying in other projects and kind of, okay, here's what our consistent costs have been over the past year or so, and we're pretty comfortable with dropping that. So we did take $65,000 out of that kind of professional services area, which about a 28% decrease in that totally. Under the next section, furnishers, fixtures, furnishings, and equipment. Allowance for computer equipment, phone, and network. We did cut that in half after a conversation with Craig Starr about the equipment we're going to need as well as what tasks that our IT department is going to be able to handle on their own. So he was pretty comfortable with that number. As well as the allowance for security and CCTV. We dropped that by $40,000 as well. And that's due to the fact of what the city's already in a process of a couple things for security upgrades, cameras, that's based on camera equipment and what it's costing us with a bit of price increase, as we get to that time frame. And Craig was pretty comfortable with where that was. So ultimately, it was a kind of an $80,000 drop in that area as well. And ultimately, the last kind of piece, there's some environmental testing and abatement that we may drop some more. We already had a phase 1 assessment done for environment, so we will modify that one down a bit as we move forward. Moving expenses, we dropped that in half. We can do that with most of everything's going to be new anyway. It wouldn't make sense bringing a lot of the old raggedy kind of broken equipment with us, so those things will be new, so we don't necessarily have a ton of moving to do. And we will finalize, which will probably round down this last number for $100,000 for the utility fees and back charges. There's already going to be a water line project that's going to stub out right there. Really, I've just had to contact the gas company and a couple of things to see kind of what those charges, would be and what we're paying, but they should be nowhere near that. But that's left in at this point. So ultimately, we were able to drop this by just those type of things, about $176.5 thousand to decrease the cost for that point. And overall, that dropped the cost from a highest cost of $5,028,950 to $4,008,52, and that's a total project budget that includes all soft costs and all construction
As long
budgets.
as we're at that point, look, this is the updated budget that shows you how much money we have and what we spent to date, and what the balance would be.
So it would seem that after looking at this, that we would, in need of about $1.5 million additional to complete the whole project.
Chief? Or
I'm sorry, sir?
is that all you have at the moment for this one?
I do. I can answer any questions. That was just kind of a general quick overview and what our recommendation is in the back. We did provide to you all the different kind of things and how we got to where we got to in the end with our final recommendation of that final C5 in the back as a piece. But
questions from the council? Council?
we do have some larger scale plans of our recommended site. I don't know if it's possible to set. We can do that.
There's no board.
Oh,
Yeah,
all right then. We could.
distribute them. If there's questions about the,
Layout of the plan.
it's up to the council if you'd like to see the plan in more detail. I don't know if you need to, but certainly willing to put it up there.
So, I guess part of what I'm gonna say has to do with a little bit with the layout, so you can decide whether you wanna put it on foam board or not. So when I picture this in my head based upon the drawings that we've seen in our packets, I think about the gym at Bates College, which is over on Russell Street. Like, I imagine it looking like that. And I don't know if either of you have seen it. But when we talk about a sloped roof, I would say that the engineers and designers didn't do the greatest job in thinking about where they put paths around that building and where they put entrances and the way the roof slopes. Because in the winter, you are in serious danger of either getting stabbed by a giant icicle or having a very large amount of snow as it melts fall on you as you're coming out of the building. So I would just urge us to be conscious of those things in ways that they weren't when they designed that building.
I can speed up. By the way, sorry for being a little late today. My name is Jeff Shaw, I'm principal at Context Architecture. And we did actually, the group committee did discuss that point
Great.
specifically when we were talking about roofs and roof design and exactly how things were going to go. In fact, one of the first comments I think we got was that roof is going the wrong direction because we're
Great.
going to dump a bunch of snow onto the patio where the grill was. So it's definitely a concern and definitely going to be a focus of the design going forward.
Great.
Anyone else? Councilor Ray.
I was trying to do some quick math. So you're saying the average cost estimate of this project is 4.259 million on this new budget? Is that correct? That was just handed out to us by Mr. Barrett?
Yes, that is, if you take that last sheet that the chief had with the corrections in it,
Yeah?
and if you average together the high and low,
Okay.
that's how that we got that
Okay,
number.
I was like,
It's
that's
just
not a number.
it's the average of the high and the low.
Okay, cool. I just want to say thank you so much for presenting every option as we kind of went through this. I think it's really interesting to see how kind of the thinking evolved over time.
And I can certainly discuss out of each of the options why we didn't choose that or why we didn't go in that direction, if you have particular questions about that. But
I don't currently, but if I do, I
I'm
will
always
follow
available,
up.
Francis.
Okay, thank you. I think that it's a lot of information. Thank you.
Councilor Marcotte?
I sort of had the same question as Councilor Ray, because I was looking at the $4.8 million number, but the average between 4.494 and 4.852, how does that become 4.259?
If you look on the last sheet that has the multiple columns where the corrections were made,
Is that
and you take
page
the
37?
page 37, yes, and you average the 4.49 and the 4.852, but you subtract out the charges for the architect, which are already separately accounted for on this sheet,
The 300 and
the 400 and
395 encumbrance?
that plus what we've already paid was 413,000.
So if you take that out and then average,
Yes, we took that out because it's a separate line item in this budget.
so with this particular proposal, you'd be looking to get another bond authorization for roughly 1.5 million beyond what we did last year?
Something in that range would be required, yes. Either a bond authorization or some other method of funding.
Interestingly, last year, when I advocated for the removal of $162,000 to come under the 100% bond authorization, I was not expecting it to come in at 3.3. I was expecting 4 point something, but I was afraid it's going to be 5 point something. Well, this is refreshing that it's in the neighborhood of 4.3.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Okay. Well, we'll always
So-
be,
You're off the hook.
Congratulations.
So absent any other comments, they're going to proceed along this line with this design, or you're all, I just want to make sure everybody's all set.
The next process would be is that we pursue this type of design, and they develop a more, I believe it's a more inclusive cost estimate where we get away from the square footage cost down to what it's actually gonna cost us to do this.
Yeah, it'd probably be a 30, 40-page document that's a line-by-line quantities takeoff survey style estimate, which will be more exacting and allow us to get into more granular detail about items, finishes, or potential alternatives. For instance, types of roofing, types of siding, materials, finishes, and what is potential cost versus the value or potential longer-term more durable material on the building. We'll be able to evaluate all those choices in the next phase.
Is the building committee going to be involved with all of the choices as far as material?
Well, the goal initially would be to kind of wide range and have the committee involved in, systems and some other larger scale type type pieces, and then staff would do the staff level type kind of pieces with information, with feedback from other areas, from other people in the department and some other parts, so.
Okay. Mr. Terrio? Oh, grab a mic if you could. We're on TV.
We're on TV. Okay, thank you. Just from a committee's point of view, we'd probably, and I'd bow to the others, like to stay involved as long as possible. Not exactly as an overview, but actually to be able to suggest recommendations at times, not just on the larger pieces, but the smaller components that go into that. And as we get into site and that sort of thing, there are always changes and tweaks, and based on some of our experience here in construction field, HVAC, and that sort of thing, I think we can add something to the project. On another note, I just want to bring to your attention that going forward, and the architects have indicated this, and there's a change, we're probably going to see a savings of at least, going forward in the next stations, about $200,000 per station in savings in architectural fees, based on the fact that we're cookie cuttering these. This will be our format for other stations. So there's a significant cost savings in regards to architectural fees and that sort of thing. Another thing, too, is that, I don't know if you got a copy or... Okay, you have a copy in front of you of some legislative action that's going to be happening at the state level to fund new fire stations and improve current fire stations to the tune of $25 million. I would strongly tell the council to support all our legislators and everyone else in regards to this type of funding. There's always a strong possibility we could get maybe half or maybe our next station paid for under this type of funding. Definitely worth taking a look at and supporting that from a council level and staff and administration whenever we can, as a suggestion. The other thing, too, in the design and the size, we went through a couple of, and this is past 2006, where we, City Council at that time, did a couple of reviews in regards to the need for other fire stations, or we lost Lincoln Street, and making up for that, so to speak. The two studies at that time, one was from a National Fire Code end, and the other one was actually petitioned by the City Council at that time, which I was on. And the conclusions on the second one actually supported the first, and probably even greater, that we actually possibly need another fire station. And thinking of where we currently locate our fire stations and the size and capability, we may be offsetting needing another fire station. So that is always in our minds of what we're doing here as far as the correct, for the chief, how to locate the next fire stations in a proximity that basically we can alleviate having to spend another $5 million somewhere and add another station. So that's kind of been the thought process all the time. So I just wanted to give you that as information. I would imagine the state component's very important to follow up on. If we could pay for one station, that'd be huge, huge. And
just a quick follow-up, that station study that Mr. Terrio referred to basically indicated that there's a potential need for improved fire protection in South Lewiston,
yep,
out toward exit 80 and stuff like that, and I think we can take that into account in looking to relocate the Lisbon Street station, so that we can get improved coverage out in that part of the community.
I support what Ed's saying here. Basically, that is a very good area to be a feeder into Lisbon Street, our back feed into River Road, and especially as exit 80 expansions that we're looking at. Also, the possibility of that station being a more enhanced training facility, since it's out of the public eye, a little bit more reserved out of town. We have greater capability to be able to train firefighters and give them the tools they need for training, such as being able to do extrications on vehicles, having them out there, being able to do fires on vehicles, that sort of thing, and which we wouldn't be able to do in any other station. So anyway, I guess that's about it, but thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
moving along, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we're going to start tonight's meeting. Let's see. One here, all right. Let's start tonight's meeting with some special recognition. Counselor Ray brought to our attention that we had 4 students who recently won Scholastic Art Awards. And I believe only one is here. Only one? Jody? All right. So I will talk a little bit about a couple of them. We had Aisha Shueb, who won a Silver Key and a runner-up 2nd District Congressional Art Award for her print, Little Boy Running. Aisha Karen got an honorable mention for her photograph, Fall Foliage. And Dharma Jo Lavasser won honorable mention for her digital photo, Citrus Splash. We also had our Youth Council's very own Carolyn Adams, for her digital photography on Dizzy, won a Silver Key Award and a 2nd District Congressional Art Award. The photo will be on exhibit in Washington, D.C. for 1 year, and Carolyn will also have a paid trip with a parent to attend a reception in June, and she also won an honorable mention for her digital portrait of Enoch as part of a Unity project that she is working on. So, being the only one here, we'll get Karen her certificate. Jody, if you want to come up too. There we go.
I'm just not allowed to judge my photography.
Oh, I like this.
Jody, do you want to say a couple? Mic there or here?
You can sit down for a moment. Not that I'm going to talk long, that's not what I'm sitting there. I want to thank you all very much for recognizing our students and their efforts. I hate to do this, I'm going to correct you.
Uh-oh, I didn't do it.
8 students earned
8?
awards. And I've got my list, I have to go to my phone and look it up, but I'm going to leave that be for now. But 8 students earned 9 Scholastic Art Awards, and 2 that were mentioned tonight earned Congressional District Awards. So Carolyn's piece is going to be hanging in Washington, D.C. It's a very big honor, and we're all very proud. Thank you for putting this on the agenda tonight.
No problem. Thank you, Jody, and the other certificates are over there if you could
Okay.
distribute those for us.
Thank
you
you
very
very
much. Carolyn, congratulations. And way to go. So, here we go. Lost my agenda. Speaking of the Youth Council, Miss Emma Williams.
The Youth Council's February 7th Let's Go Eat event at the Franco Center was a huge hit. The response was great, with people standing in line by 5:20 prior to our 6 o'clock opening. As you recall, the reason we hosted this food sampling event was to highlight Lewiston as a food and dining destination place as part of our Shine on Lewiston series. 12 restaurants chose to participating, donating some of their food. Participating restaurants were Fishbones, Da Vinci's, Fran's, Marco's, Pedro O'Hara's, Cowbell, Mother India, Luigi's, Cupcakery, Eclair and Pastries, and Italian Bakery. In addition to taste testing, attendees talked with restaurant owners about their offerings and signed display billboards with opinions of Lewiston's food. Eliac also handed out "Where's the Food, Lewiston, Maine" bumper stickers. We also had a PowerPoint of scenes playing from Lewiston on the center's big screen. I'd also like to thank Mayor Bouchard, Councilor Beam, Councilor Wright, and Councilor Pettengill for attending. Both at the event and since then, we have heard raves about Lewiston food, and one of our favorites is wow, I want to go to Lewiston to eat. It all looks delicious. We feel that we met our goal of bringing awareness of what it's like to eat in here in Lewiston. Our next meeting is February 26th, and we'll be hearing a presentation from Deputy Planning and Co-Director Doug Green about Lewiston's current beautification efforts. And one of our members would also like to discuss doing something about bullying, as it is prevalent in the news. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Okay, acceptance of the minutes, February 5th, 2019. I'm sure we all read them in detail. I'll accept a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, Council Marcotte, second Council Cloutier, all in favor? Unanimous. Excellent. Public comment period. Any member of the public may make comments regarding issues pertaining to city government. If they're not already on the agenda, Mr. Sewell.
This, either I'm shrinking due to old age or this podium's getting taller. Charles Arthur Soul, 135 Bartlett Street, Lewiston, Maine. I got my address right this time. Last time I said 170 Bartlett Street, but that's because I've lived on Bartlett Street for over going on 19 years and at 2 different addresses. I'm here tonight to take up an issue regarding the Lewiston PD and their policing of the inner city. Prostitution is rampant. Drug dealing right in front of the house on the corner of Walnut and Bartlett. This morning I walked out and the crack house next door, which has been reported to the Lewiston PD, is still in operation. And I reported that about 3 days ago. However, the one across the street from the park here, I reported into them about a year ago, and that's still in operation. That's apartment number 5, LPD, and I email it to them. I give them the address, give them the apartment number, and all they need is a show up. If you remember what happened last summer with the death in the park, lady stabbed on College Street, older man shot by a stray bullet on College Street, my friend Mike, who lives behind Webb's, was walking, he's 75 years old, by the way. He's walking in front of his house, and he's wondering why the dirt's spitting up around his feet. Well, someone had opened fire on an individual in front of him, or say in back of him. Next thing you know, the police are pulling out bullets from his porch roof that him and his wife sit on. Yeah, I called. I do an article on the website. I have a website. All you got to do is Google Soul Lewiston, Maine. It's called the Auburn Lewiston News Rebuttal. All you got to do is Google Soul Lewiston, Maine if you ain't stupid. But then again, look what happened to the school department having to go back and change the requirement for graduating because half the class couldn't graduate this year if they didn't go back and change the requirement that they put into place. And then you wonder why I call it the dirty Lou. Teachers can't even teach the requirement that they put into place. Now, I swear to God, you know, we're getting to the point with the drugs in this city and the rampant crime, shootings. 40 shots went off last summer. Bullets were piercing business windows, pellet guns and guns. I don't want to see that happening this summer. Not in my neighborhood. I will have to go to vigilante. I'll ask any veteran out there to join me. I'm 66 years old. And you know, to tell you the truth, the way I see America going today, I will be the first line of defense so my son can be the second, perhaps. You know, when you get old enough, you say, hey, when to die and who to take with you when you go. Now, maybe you need a new administration. I've talked to a lot of the young officers. I email them. I email them from my website, which, by the way, is about 120,000 strong, and I'm read from Chile to China. The only thing I can't do is get Lewiston people to read it. Why? School system can't teach. And I want to thank Andrew Rice, a reporter for the Sun Media Group, for covering that. It would have just slipped by us. Half the class would not graduate. But then again, that's not bad. There's No Child Left Behind, started by a Republican, wasn't it? George Bush Jr.? You know? So, but no, the school committee had to go back and change the requirement to push them on. I don't know what's coming up with America. You know, sometimes I say, Lord, you take me anytime. I know there's a lot of people in Lewiston that might say, take them. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm really discouraged of what I see in America these days. You've got, I believe that, I don't want to pick on the Lewiston PD, but maybe you should take some of that community development grant money and stick it in the increase in the police force, which I believe is down about maybe 7 or 8 officers from the 1980 figures of manpower. Well, I guess I'm done ranting and raving. You know, sometimes you got to vent. You got to vent to get things done. You know, you're going to stand by and let the community be drugged out. Oh, here they are advertising rehabs on TV. You know, the morality of this country. I was watching a TV show and they're showing how to shoot up on TV. Is your kid watching that? You got Jerry Springer showing up when kids are getting out of school. Is that the type of America you want? Sex is rampant on the internet. Prostitution right off Facebook. You know, does a community have a right to gauge its own morality and block some of what is occurring or coming into this community? I think so. I think it's time to grab a hold of Facebook and a lot of these sites and block them from entering into a community. Does a community have a right to set its own morality? Yes. Let's wake up. We've seen what liberalism has done to America, at least I have. I watched it for 66. You got Me Too movement alienating men from women. Well, while you're doing that, you're alienating your son. Or you're alienating your daughter. It's time to wake up. You know, and say, hey, Lord, you want to take me tonight? I'm willing to go because I want to see what's coming on the pike in this country. And I suspect that the Lewiston city budget will increase about $7 million. That's what I put out on my internet site. Remember that. All you got to do is Google Seoul, Lewiston, Maine, see what comes up, look for the Auburn, Lewiston News rebuttal, and follow the trend. Hey, I didn't get on the internet until I was 60, and now I get a worldwide read newspaper. And to think, it's generated from Lewiston, Maine. And I didn't use those words I used earlier. You guys have a good day. Have a good night. You know, it's easy for me to rant and rave. I live in the inner city. I see it all. I don't live on the outskirts, and I will bury my head in the sand. Maybe if I lived out on the outskirts, I realize Lewiston's pretty on the outside. But by God, you better when the warm weather gets here, you better have a 24-hour patrol in the inner city, or you're going to have gang warfare like you had last summer. And that makes it truly a dirty loo. I didn't do a dirty loo. 3 people, 1 shot, 2 dead. Lack of policing. You got cameras up there, and who's watching? Who's watching them? Put some of that general assistance people watching what's going on. Lewiston, you better pick up the pace. And I'm not blaming the new officers. Manpower is another thing. Use some of that community development block grant money, and instead of giving it away, maybe people should be weaned off it. If you've been on community development block grant money for 4 years, you've got time to get off it. It isn't there for you to satisfy 20 years worth of employment. It's supposed to build a community. And there's no better building a community than making it safe by policing. Have a good night. Thank you for listening.
Anyone else? Okay. Public comments closed. Roll call.
All roll call votes for this meeting will begin with the Councilor of Ward 4.
Consent agenda.
There are 2 items on consent agenda this evening. Item number 1, order authorizing execution of a municipal quitclaim deed for real estate located at 84 Summit Avenue. And number 2, order authorizing execution of a municipal quitclaim deed for real estate located at 267.5 Lincoln Street rear.
So moved.
Second. Motion by Counselor Cloutier, seconded by Counselor Joy. Questions from council? No public on consent, so call the roll.
Counsel from Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 3.
Item number 3, amendments to the city policy manual regarding the commercial loan programs policy. Requested action to repeal the existing commercial loan programs policy, policy manual number 27, in its entirety, and replace it in full with the new commercial loan programs policy as recommended by the city administrator and the director of economic and community development.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Counselor LaJoy, seconded by Counselor Ray. Questions from the council? Public?
Can I inquire what, Charles Soule, 135 Bartlett Street, can I inquire what the changes are?
Can have Lincoln rehash last week's workshop for you. Mr. Jeffers?
Yep, we are adding a micro enterprise loan program, which is really intended to help low to moderate income people be employed either as a starting a business or employing folks in that category. That'd be for up to $15,000. We're amending our economic development loan program to better meet the requirements that HUD has out there. We've had it at $25,000 per job. One job is to be created for every $25,000, federal regulations for every $35,000. We are amending our facade program, where historically we've done the entire facade under HUD regulations. We really should only be doing the commercial aspect unless it's a historic building. So the changes are dialing that in better, and we're also creating a program that will allow us to do residential development on the upper floors of downtown buildings. Which historically, we've not been able to do that easily. We've really dialed it in based on regulations, and we can do both affordable and market rate housing with different match requirements depending. If it's going to be market rate housing, it's really limited to the 3 downtown census tracts. So, do you have any specific questions? Okay. Nope, great. Yeah, and we did have a workshop last week, and
Anyone on the council have any other questions for Link while he's there? Any other member of the public? And back to the council again. Call the roll.
Counsel from Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 4.
Item number 4, resolve repealing City Master Policies 32, Lewiston Shining Stars Program, number 50, the Alfred A. Plord Memorial Scholarship, and number 84, Adopt a Trash Can. Requested action to approve the resolve repealing City Master Policies number 32, Lewiston Shining Stars Program, number 50, the Alfred A. Plord Memorial Scholarship, and number 84, Adopt a Trash Can.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Ray, seconded by Counselor Pettengill. Ed, would you like to?
Yes, just very briefly, I think all of these, in effect, are no longer, none of these programs are in effect any further. The Shining Stars program sunset due to funding constraints and the amount of staff time needed to organize the program. I don't think that has actually been done since at least 10 years. The Alfred A. Plord Memorial Scholarship, that scholarship, the accumulated principal has been used up in that program, so it's no longer effectively funded. And the Adopt a Trash Can policy, that was a program where trash cans were painted by kids in our recreation programs and adopted by property owners. Over the years, those trash cans have more or less disappeared and are no longer to be found. So it's not a current program. And certainly just to note, that is something that we have Doug Green and our planning people taking a look at in terms of a more comprehensive approach to trash in the community, particularly in our downtown residential area.
Questions?
And just in terms of, so it sounds like that adopt a trash can thing isn't happening, but we're moving towards something else with Doug. And I would also just point out that the Shining Stars program, while it's not the same as the Lewiston Youth Advisory Council, is somewhat related, so.
That's true. I think you're right that one of the interesting things that the Youth Council has been doing this year is trying to highlight people in the community. That's, I think, been a very positive effort on their part.
Just in terms of the scholarship program, is there a policy about establishing future memorial scholarship programs similar to this one at all in the master policies?
We do not have one, and in fact, I would kind of suggest that we would probably be better served by working with other groups in the community that already have scholarship funds, such as the Chamber, which is combined with the program that used to work to get older adults back to school and had a bunch of scholarship programs. We are not particularly well suited for operating a scholarship program, and quite honestly, in that program was a relatively small amount of money, and we didn't get a huge number of applicants. So I think it would make more sense for us to be supportive of other folks' efforts.
And I assume that also means that there are no other memorial or any types of scholarships under the city's purview
Now,
at
this was the
point.
only one
Great.
that I'm aware of.
Yeah,
So,
go for it.
sorry, just to follow up on that, I'm pretty sure that the Youth Advisory Council has a scholarship that's funded through the firefighters.
The firefighters, and it is for the firefighters for someone who's on the youth council.
Yes.
Yes, but that's a separate program.
But the
of
money would be
the,
managed by a fire
It's
union.
being handled by
Yes.
the union and fire.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Yeah, I don't think we're equipped to manage an endowment of that sort, so. Makes sense.
Public? And call the roll.
Counsel from Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1? Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Oh, wait, oh, yes, sorry.
Two more. Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Item number 5.
Item number 5, receipt of recommendation from the Finance Committee and the Planning Board on the fiscal year 2020 Lewiston Capital Improvement Plan budget. Requested action to receive and review the recommendations from the Finance Committee and the Planning Board regarding the fiscal year 2020 Lewiston Capital Improvement Plan.
So moved.
Second.
We're not voting on that, are we? Just a receipt?
Right, receiving it. You can review it if you'd like, yeah.
Okay, so we've got them in our packets. I know Mr. Terrio, Chair of the Finance Committee, is here, so if you would like to opine, sir, the floor is yours.
My name is Dennis. My name is Dennis Terry. I'm the chairman of the Finance Committee for Lewiston. I've been asked by the committee to read the presentation, and answer any questions if you might have questions. Finance Committee has reviewed the FY20 Lewiston Capital Improvement Program, LCIP, as requested. The Finance Committee recognizes that this document is a long-term planning tool utilized by the City Council and administration, and that all projects are subject to scrutiny of the budgetary process. If projects as requested are approved, including both the administrator and superintendent's recommendations, the proposed FY20 bond authorization amount would significantly exceed the 80% bond issue limitation as established by the City Ordinance, Chapter 2, Article 2, Section 2-34, Council Action of Bond Authorization. Highlighted, we've indicated, having said this, the Finance Committee supports the 80% standard until the increase in economic development can support an increase in debt spending. To quote the city administrator, over time, these approaches allowed the city to gradually reduce its outstanding debt, interest due, and the percentage of operating budget devoted to debt service. If it is necessary to revisit some of our approaches to debt issuance in the coming years and our reliance on the 80% standard to govern new debt authorization, let this happen with a strong, measurable, and functioning development plan in place to grow the tax base. The Finance Committee realizes that a capital improvement plan falls under 3 measurable factors, that being to restore, to improve, and to expand. We firmly believe that in order to accomplish the first 2 objectives, we need to expand the tax base in Lewiston. This focus should be of paramount importance. The Finance Committee supports the projects listed in the LCIP, with the exception of the items noted below. The citywide evaluation. Next item is the police building expansion project. And our comment, a very cost-effective approach to this request is to utilize the former Violations Bureau, given city ownership and ample parking in the vicinity. The committee would support a cost-effective assessment of both buildings to analyze needs compared to building capacity. Public Works vehicles and equipment wash facility. This project should be deferred, and it should be deferred, excuse me, if determined, I'm sorry, if the $550,000 is sufficient. We kind of quickly realize if you look at the J&S operation, they put in $500,000 into that. A city operation being able to handle multitask vehicles, fire, plows, small pickups, have different demands. So we thought that was kind of under budgeted. Lewiston Middle School electrical upgrade should be deferred to FY21, given the recent building addition and upgrades made with that project. Lewiston High School wing should be postponed until after the citywide vote, and the vote should be timed during an election which would garner high voter turnout. District-wide security upgrades should be phased in over 3 to 4 years, period, beginning after the building access control project and started with the highest risk building first. The building access control project actually gives you the ability to know who's entering the building through swipe cards, that sort of thing. So if that's implemented, we can probably phase in TV cameras, everything else into all the buildings. That was our thinking. Based upon the information shared by the Public Works Director, the Hudson Bus Soccer Field project should be postponed until the approval is received from the National Park Service. Haven't gotten that wave off yet. Additionally, the Finance Committee wishes to emphasize the following points and supports it. The $8 million federal and state investment into Auburn-Lewiston Airport is a significant and welcome upgrade to the airport given the small local share requirement. Runways definitely need it. It's huge. And that builds capability into our system of accessing Lewiston Auburn and increases our appeal to businesses. Public safety is of extreme importance to the committee. The 911 radio project addresses the need to have seamless, reliable radio systems and meshes nicely with the new fire substations. This project projects a safe community and appealing business environment. That was our thinking and focus, especially on the business end. Lewiston marketing campaign, create an expanded program that allows for Lewiston businesses to provide matching dollars to enhance the campaign and entice businesses similar to the City of Auburn model. Had breakfast one morning with the Mayor of Auburn, and they have initiated a similar program where their base money is enhanced by businesses and whatever. It gives them the capability of, so to speak, skin in the game, where they're involved, they see where their money's being projected and used in the community. Great partnerships that can be done there. Okay, both the canal ownership and Riverfront Island implementation projects were cautiously supported, but would rather see these projects funded through operating budget or the amounts reduced. The committee would also like to see the measurable outcomes of increased economic activity with these investments. We just like to have something measurable to look at based on what we're putting in, and basically feedback either from businesses, that sort of thing. So we don't reach a point where we've invested into an area and go, I think we've overdone it. We never took a snapshot of what's going on. And basically we should have some kind of timeline in looking at that going forward and going, it's a good investment. We've accomplished this with milestones, and that was the reasoning behind that. The amounts noted for the fire stations do not reflect the total actual projected cost, which you've heard tonight. These amounts should be changed in the future, and the additional funding for the Sabata Street Fire Station should be included in the bond authorization. The Birch, Karen, and Jefferson Street sidewalk project should evaluate the flow of student pedestrian traffic to determine if this project can be phased over multiple years, based on the usage, amount of trips, that sort of thing. It may be an approach to lessen dollars. Evaluations should be made on leasing versus purchasing vehicles and equipment, particularly specialty items, and prolonged purchases as long as possible. We were basically looking at Public Works at the time. And does leasing make more sense based on hours used and the utility of the vehicle versus it's sitting there for 5, 6, 7 months? Is it cheaper to actually lease, but not have that long-term depreciating expense? In conclusion, the Finance Committee has only given you a snapshot of ideas and recommendations. It is very difficult to do a concise review of the LCIP with the document changing as we speak. As the city administrator has remarked, we cannot fully fund or afford all the scheduled LCIP projects. We agree with him that we will be required to carefully prioritize what must and should be done. The committee urges the council and administrative staff to focus on a plan which will strengthen and significantly grow our tax base. Businesses locating in our community are the economic engine that will drive jobs, more affordable housing, and a stronger infrastructure. The Finance Committee stands ready to aid the City Council and administration in coming up with alternative ideas to save money, streamline projects for cost effectiveness, and more. We look forward to seeing the final draft of the FY20 LCIP as the City of Lewiston moves into the future. I'd just like to probably add to that I think Finance Committee is very positive about Lewiston's future and ready to help in any way we can in positive ideas. So, thank you for listening. Appreciate it. Any questions? Anything?
Dennis, Councilor Wright.
Yep, I have a couple. So the Lewiston Middle School electrical upgrade deferment, how did you determine this could be deferred? Was that discussed with facilities through the school committee or?
No, we did not. Basically, we took, based on experience that was sitting on the board, we're going, okay, the middle school was basically just upgraded with the new expansions. Let's put it this way. When you look at the requests, all of a sudden, there's 2, 3 locations that are doing expansions or changes to the electrical system. What triggered that all of a sudden?
Well, I think talking to the school department might help with that. Yeah.
Totally agree, but understand, we don't get a chance to talk to all departments.
So the planning board did speak with the school department, and so I'm trying to suss out why that opportunity
and that's fine. And
wasn't given to
again,
the
we're telling you, we did a snapshot here and taking a look. So what we did, we prioritized a school that had already been revamped, being the middle school. They must have taken a look at the electrical system, and we haven't heard of the city electrical department saying that this does not meet code or anything else. So basically, we took the older school and factored in the newer one at a later date.
Okay. The Lewiston High School wing vote is scheduled for November already, according to what we've heard. So that comment about postponing until after a citywide vote, we've already heard about November. If I'm wrong, there are some members of the building committee here, so no, I'm right. Okay. So I'm not sure I understand that comment.
Understand, Council, this document changes all the time, and basically as we're sitting here, so updated information, we take a look at what's in front of us at the time. So you're privy to much more information than we are, and the planning board was given an excellent presentation from city staff, from what I understand. So again, this is a snapshot approach. We're willing to take a look at the final LCIP and basically work with you on that if there's needed help, or in looking at different changes and also upgrades.
We've also heard that when we're looking at building access control and district-wide security upgrades, that they should all be done at the same time due to cost savings when you bundle it all together. So it appears we have more information on the school department side of things, so I would hope they're invited in the future to speak with you all before judgments are made. I think I'm pretty surprised that the planning board worked really closely with the school department to get that presentation so questions could be answered as things were coming online, and that wasn't afforded to them through the finance committee. I think you've obviously gone through line by line, but as a member of the school committee, it was really surprising to see those things highlighted in this document when I think a conversation could have been had, right? So,
Totally agree. And if you feel that the Finance Committee should be asking different departments in, we will do that.
yeah, I
Okay?
definitely think so, at least for the
We
schools.
have kind of limited time frame and whatever. Planning Board went into this quite a bit more extensive, and also they have a public meeting component that they have to accomplish in order to answer public questions, which we don't have on a finance end, okay? We don't have that public, open discussion or whatever. So we take a snapshot look at this and basically try to grab key items. If you want us to take a look at the electrical portion again, we will have school department come in and we will revisit that and set that up for the next meeting and do that.
That'd be great. I think
That's not an
that's the
issue.
way to make
We're not saying no. We're saying
I get that.
the feasibility and can it be done. That's all. But again, you're sitting with a little bit more information, as you should. I've sat in that seat, and I've sat on the planning board. So I'm quite aware. Planning board's a little bit more extensive. They keep the comp plan. They have quite a bit more duties. So, but we will call the school board people in, and we'll review that and give you an updated comment on that.
Yeah, I would just say, I think this gives an impression that these are things that you're willing to move off the table. I know we're not voting on this tonight, we're just accepting the recommendations, but I think these are some pretty big things that could be resolved with a conversation, and I just am disappointed that they came up in this way, rather than the school department being involved in the process all the way through.
We do
So
the best
that's-
we can with what's in front of us, and
Okay,
they're
that's
all-
my feedback.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Any other questions?
Councilor Markham.
As a member of the Finance Committee and paying attention to what happens at the City Council, Planning Board, and other areas of the city for a number of decades, we're looking at a rather significant debt level in this community. As Mr. Terrio understands, it was his City Council in 2009 that came to the Finance Committee, my first year there, seeking a 97% factor, which has grown to 80%. That 80% came to my Finance Committee a couple of years later to shore it up even further, because we're experiencing the downturn in the economy that began in 2008. When things like the middle school facade project happened, that was a $13 million project, if I'm not mistaken. That, coupled with other projects that year, just took that needle and just moved it wildly. We have still not recovered from that particular breach of the 80%. Last year, we breached 80%, as was mentioned earlier tonight. I sought to keep it under 100%. I'm looking at a $14 million request. We all know that not everything's going to be funded, as the city administrator has said. Finance Committee looks at these items. It's all it has to work with. It's trying to prioritize in its mind's eye, as to what makes sense, what can be moved off the table one year, what can be maybe phased over several years. I guess we come down to, as a council, because it is in our purview, eventually, what else would we move off the table to get from 14 million to 7 million? 7 million is the 80% number. We heard tonight that the fire substation requires 1.5 million. That takes it to roughly 8.6. We're approaching 100% at that point. I'm not willing to breach 100% this year. Well, that's why my participation on the Finance Committee will help drive some of these talking points. And that's what I have to say on the matter.
Anyone else?
Guess I'd just like to finish off. This is actually my 7th LCIP, over 25 years. Done this a few times, and I understand it's a gigantic wish list at times, and then after that we have to sit back and go, and the city administrator and staff sits back and go, okay, Santa may want, the kids may want everything, but what can Santa really bring, and what can the parents afford? And that's kind of what we're sitting down and trying to juggle a balance. And that's all we did, was give a snapshot, because as I said, this document has changed dramatically from the time that you received it, and is continuing to do that. And it should. As Ed has pointed out, it's an evolving document. It's a working document. It's something that changes. We're going to maybe come up again with ideas from the Finance Committee, and we're going to send them to you individually whenever we come up with something, if that can help, or a different idea and how to prioritize something, we're going to do it. Different approach, different people sitting there, we're going to do it for you. And we're only doing it as helping, we're not telling you what to do. That's your job. You'll have the final vote. Been there, done that. So thank you very much for your time, unless you have anything else.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and we also have a recommendation from the planning board. I'm not sure if David, Doug, or Ed want to go over the 4 recommendations that the planning board. Just do a quick 1, 2. All right. Looks like 3-7 nothing votes and a 6-1 vote. Any context for us?
Not necessarily beyond what's been listed here. They didn't necessarily go into the detail that the Finance Committee did, but there was some similarities with respect to the Hudson bus there. They talked about consolidating some road improvements there with Birch and Karen Street. They did talk about the truck wash facility as well, but it wasn't necessarily to put it off as much as to make sure if that gets funded, that if other people are going to use it, we actually get reimbursed for that. There was some comments, but they didn't necessarily take a vote on it as far as concerns about deferred maintenance on a number of things, and that's part of the reason why this is such a huge ask. And that there was discussion about even like, should we exceed the 80%? There was questions from a finance perspective as to interest rates. Is now the time to do it, to actually borrow more money? Again, no action was taken on that, but they just had this overall discussion and concern about deferred maintenance throughout the city.
Questions for David? Thank you. Okay, I guess we can hash out some of these recommendations on item number 6, if we want to just move on to 6. Do public comment for 6.
Item number 6, resolve adopting the fiscal year 2020 Lewiston Capital Improvement Plan. Requested action that pursuant to Article 6, Section 607D of the City Charter, the City Council hereby approves the resolve adopting the fiscal year 2020 City of Lewiston 5-year capital improvement program as prepared by the City Administrator.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Cloutier, seconded by Councilor Ray. And this does not mean we're approving this or all the expenditures, just that we've received it, we approve it. We can amend it based on the recommendations we've received, or we can wait until we actually consider the LCIP. As Mr. Terrio said, the document is continually changing, and we can do it at that time. So.
Yeah, one of the points I tried to make when I talked to the planning board is that I think sometimes the planning board and finance committee are a little bit concerned at this point in the process because they're not always sure that their recommendations have been received and are being listened to. I just tried to emphasize to them that it's been my experience that the council takes those recommendations quite seriously at the point where they actually make funding decisions. And of course, in the meantime, we will continue to make adjustments in these budgets and proposals as we get better information, and at some point we will come forward with some of our own recommendations about what should and shouldn't be bonded, what could potentially be funded from other sources, and what would be deferred.
Questions, comments, concerns? Councilor Beam?
So why are we actually officially adopting this LCIP
Because the city charter requires that you do so.
before we've,
The city charter requires that
Changed.
the LCIP be adopted at least 4 months prior to the end of the fiscal year.
okay, and the city charter also makes accommodations for changes?
Yes, because approving the plan does not fund the projects.
Right.
Okay.
Projects are funded separately through the budget process and the annual bond authorization.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Cloutier?
Yeah, I mean, I would just agree with what the city administrator just said. I feel like we get to this point in the process. This is my 6th budget. where like people are freaking out about everything that's in the LCIP, even though we all realize that not everything in there is going to be funded. And then we carefully come back throughout the budget process and decide what is going to be included and what's not going to be included. And I'm comfortable with that process. I think that makes the most sense to look at the budget comprehensively as opposed to looking at individual items right now before we even know what that budget's going to look like.
Yeah, the logic is sound. The logic is to try to get all of these capital needs in front of the city council prior to dealing with the full budget picture, so that it's not an after-the-fact thing. I don't want to pick on the state, but the state always does its bonds at the end of the process, rather than looking at it as part of the entire budgetary process. I suspect the state administration looks at it that way, but I know the legislature always gets at it to the end. We follow kind of the same process that we do the bond authorization after the budget, but a lot of the decisions made in the budget are influenced by what we can and can't pull into the operating budget to try to fund in terms of capital expenses. And I know we'll be doing the same thing this year as we've done the last few years, which is looking at unallocated fund balance to support some of these projects.
Councilor Ray.
Thank you. So I think, obviously, I know this process, having gone through it last year, but being able to have at the beginning of the process a snapshot, as the Finance Committee Chair had said, of what people are thinking might be negotiable and what isn't, is really helpful. And it has been for me, learning the process last year and then executing and doing so again this year. I think making sure that everyone who needs to be involved is really critical to moving this process forward. So I just want to continue to see a lot of integration between the committees, between the boards, and the actual departments and staff.
Thank you, Council. Councilor Martin.
I'd like to just go back to the recommendation a second here and direct the councilors to take a look at some of the key words that were placed throughout the body. Increase in economic development, expanding the tax base, and strong, measurable, and functioning development plan in place to grow the tax base. We would love to have funded the entire $14 million, but we just cannot do it as a community. We're not growing the tax base as fast as the demands on the Treasury. And so when that's addressed, and as everyone probably has thought of at least once this evening, if CMP was in place, we probably would be able to. Things like that need to happen, must happen, and we need to be encouraging more of it on the third floor.
Thank you, Council. Public. Anyone from the public?
My name is Paul Robinson, 200 Gayton Road. I'm a newly appointed member to the Planning Board, alternate. And we went through the LCIP fairly closely. And David gave a pretty good snapshot of what we discussed in one thing and another. I have a particular interest in the Public Works Department and the maintenance that program that they would like to have. It's been put off several times to the detriment of the equipment, that sort of thing. It does have a high price tag, but I feel that it's instrumental for the future in order to keep the vehicles and other items that require the maintenance running, particularly during the winter. And we're experiencing a winter that I'm sure that Public Works would appreciate that. The other item that I feel very strongly about is 911 and the new radio system. I know that it has a high price tag. The director of 911 has made an effort to whinny that down. I think that's going to be performed in stages. I think it's very, very important that everyone is able to communicate with each other, whether it's the school, the fire department, the police department, whether it's Auburn, whether it's Lewiston. They all get on the same page, and I think in the long run that may actually save lives. So I think for that investment, it's very important. Not much is said about it, I think, because of the high price tag, it's difficult for people to get their arms around something like that. But I do feel that that's critical to the improvement for both communities. Also, we appreciate the city manager came in front of us. We went through many of the items that were brought up, and Ed was able to explain in detail exactly our concerns, took the time to do it, and I think by the time it was all finished that the committee itself felt better about the questions that were raised. Being a realist, we do realize that not everything is going to be approved, and that can be a discussion later on, even for 2021. But I'd like to say thank you for that. Also, Dave's comment, and we will do the best we can, perhaps not to the detail that the Finance Committee is. We look at the overview and don't get into the weeds as far as the money. But we do have an input on what we feel, the committee feels is important to the committee, and we'd like to see those items passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Anyone else?
Hi, Luke Jensen, 89 Shawmut Street, Apartment 3. Just wanted to encourage keeping the school projects on the LCIP, at least at this point, keeping them on as planned. I represent Ward 5 in the school committee. I'm chair of the facilities subcommittee. That's a subcommittee that deals with any LCIP planning for the district. We've put a lot of thought into this. There's a lot of projects that we'd like to see happen, but we're kind of, picking and choosing what can we kind of push down the line. So there has been a lot of thought that's gone into that. So any project that's coming before you, in a request like this is something that's very, very much at the top of our list. There's definitely a reason that we're asking for it. Big reason I'm here tonight is, I think it was about 5:06 a.m. this morning, our superintendent sent an email saying that the Finance Committee had sent a recommendation recommending some changes to the school projects. None of us were aware of that, and I know there might be a couple other people here tonight for that reason as well. So I definitely wanted to continue, or urge the council to continue with that, especially having a November of this year vote set for any project going forward, which I believe that's what is required anyways for the project to continue. It would have to be approved by the voters, most likely based on the amount. There's a lot of thought that went into that as well. I'm also on that building committee, which is kind of changing its role right now to add that new wing at the high school. So there was a lot of thought that went into when exactly should that vote happen. And I get that there may be more voters in November of 2020 than November of 2019, but it's still a big election year. We shouldn't postpone a vote, 2 years just to get a bigger percentage of people. The people who show up are the ones that, should have the say. So I just urge continuation going forward of that. Apologize for not having any school committees members or anybody representing the district at the Finance Committee. I should say, too, that I'm speaking as an individual myself, not for the school committee or any employee of the district. We weren't aware that it was on the Finance Committee's agenda to discuss the school projects. We had school committee meetings that night as well as subcommittee meetings beforehand, and there were we'd sent our chief academic officer to the planning committee meeting that night to discuss some of the school issues there, which we were aware of. So I apologize going forward. We definitely want to discuss with the Finance Committee why they came to the recommendations that they did. So we'd be more than willing to have that meeting and sit down with them. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Jensen? Anyone else in public?
Hi, good evening. Thank you. I'm Francis Gagnon, 18 College Street, Ward 3. I'm also on the school committee, and I am the chair to the Visual and Performing Arts Committee for the school committee. Superintendent wanted to apologize. He's heading up to Baxter State Park right now. It's an annual cross-country pilgrimage, I guess. I don't know what he calls it, but something that he does yearly with several people. We were a little surprised by this today, so apologize for my lack of preparation here. And thank you, Mr. Jensen, for coming and speaking on your behalf as well. And one other thing, so a lot of things in play here, and we would hope that you move the recommendation so it is at November's election. Let the voters decide. We have things
hopefully in play so that after 50 years of waiting, this wing, which includes the arts as well as other things, because this high school is overwhelmed right now with space, this would certainly add to the educational value for our students, the art department, special ed department, and other departments as well. It would also, we've also looked at bringing it at a bigger election, but at least for this year, bringing the LCIP for this November. Would also, we looked at cost savings, and we believe that this would not only save the city a lot of money in the short run, but also add tax value in the long run as well. So if you're looking at the big picture, I think this would be the most advantage. This would bring the most advantage to our city and bring a stronger tax base. I've heard some talk about that this evening, and that's part of the picture that we've looked at altogether. Sorry, I'm just trying to think of my notes. But anyhow, I would hope that you would move forward so that this moves into the November election. And I thank you again for your time and all the hard work you put into it. It's not an easy decision on all the different aspects that you have to deal with this decision. So thank you very much.
Okay, anyone else? Back to the council. Councilor Cloutier.
So can I just ask what the process is for the planning board with the LCIP and the presentation, and the process is for the finance committee with the LCIP and the presentation? Because it seems to me like the conversation we're having here is more driven by there being a different process in place for each of those two committees, and I'm wondering why that is, and I guess I would request that we sort of align those better so that we're not running into these issues again.
I think part of the issue is that those committees do not have a lot of time to look at the plan. They basically have 1 or 2 meetings, I think 2. The planning board looked at it on their own at their first meeting. They sent a bunch of questions around for staff. And when we went back to the next meeting, we tried to respond to those questions. Heather was at the Finance Committee meeting. One of the things that complicates this somewhat is that both those meetings are back-to-back. They run across each other.
Well, and they're also scheduled at the same time as the school committee meetings, so I feel like, maybe it makes sense to do a joint meeting of all 3 of those committees on a different night, or on a Monday, and have people be prepared when they show up to that meeting to ask questions.
Excellent idea.
Yeah.
So if we could look at that for next year, that would be great.
Councilor Marcotte?
Some of what I was going to say just got addressed, but I'm surprised that there's much shock here because this process happens every year. There were very specific recommendations made by the planning board in years past. This may be one of the first or few by the finance committee where it got so specific. And I'm going to make the statement that we were meeting on the same night this past season, so getting certain members of staff, that's why Ed facilitated the planning board and Heather the finance committee. But going to the recommendation with respect to the Performing Arts Center, the current item for the LCIP was $800,000. That's preliminary work. I guess the comment in the recommendation about having a larger turnout at the election just kind of went right by me, because it made no difference to me whether the election was 2019 or 2020. My thinking was 800,000 doesn't need to be in this LCIP. If it passes in 2019 at the ballot box, then it gets put into the 2021 LCIP as 13 or 14 million plus the 800,000. That's the only reason the Finance Committee, at least from my perspective, was looking to push that out. In this particular year, seeing as how we are more than double the recommendation at the 80% level. 80% level specifically was $7,086,000, and, we were more than double that at 14 point some odd million. There had to be priorities set, and also, said throughout the recommendation was why the other items that were not sought to be struck or altered in any fashion was because those items would help grow the tax base. Until we have a school system that starts graduating more than 67% of its students, I don't think we need frills. So if you need just a little bit extra space, we got an elementary school that's closing next year. I think it'd cost us a whole lot less to put a little bit of investment in there to facilitate the growth in students. So that was my thinking on that item in the recommendation.
Anyone else? Okay, this is going to be a tough LCIP. We need it all, and we don't have the money for most of it. I'm not comfortable over 80%. I feel like we're going to have to go over 80%. So it's going to be fun. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 7.
Item number 7, resolve establishing an ad hoc advisory committee for the update of design regulations. Requested action, to adopt the resolve establishing an ad hoc advisory committee for the update of design regulations.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Ray, seconded by Counselor Cloutier. Questions? Counselor Ray.
There's just a typo in the resolve that says 8 members, and it's now 10 members.
Oops. I apologize.
No,
I
that's
picked
okay. I
up
just
the new
wanted-
members, just forgot to change that.
Figured I should point it out. Thanks.
Excellent. Public questions. Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 8.
Item number 8, order authorizing the library director to execute a memorandum of participation in the Minerva Public Library Consortium. Requested action to approve the order authorizing the library director to execute a memorandum of participation with the Minerva Public Library Consortium.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Ray, seconded by Counselor LaJoy. Ed, do you have
Yes,
10
there-
seconds on this for
Well,
those who don't know
first
what
off, I would
Minerva
tell you
is?
that our library director would have loved to have been here tonight, but she had her baby. So she is now out. In fact, probably what we ought to do is to amend the resolve to authorize me to sign the agreement since she's on
Yeah.
maternity leave. The Minerva system is basically a unified data management, library management system that's used by the majority of libraries in the state. So for example, when you go on to our automated card catalog, that's really you're going into the Minerva system. You can then, if you're looking for a book and we don't have it, and it's in another library in the system, you can request it. So it really helps them to manage their circulation, manage their book collection, manage a lot of the functions of the library in a very cost-effective way where we're not required to have our own system. So we're just a participating member of this system. Plus, by working with the other libraries, I think we get access to some training, best practices, and ideas from around the state that we can try to implement here. So it's both cost-effective, it's very, for those of you who are big library users, it's a huge improvement over the old systems, either individually automated or card catalogs. Some of us remember card catalogs. And it's really important for the library to function.
So city administrator has recommended a small amendment to allow him to sign. Is that a good friendly, Ray?
Yes.
LaJoy?
Yes.
Okay. Counselor Ray, Counselor LaJoy agree, so we're talking about it as amended. Counselor Markov.
This is not a program that's been used historically. This is brand new to us.
No, it is one that we've used for a long time. This is just a new agreement. They've updated the agreement, and I guess they're going to a system where it's renewed every 3 or 5 years. I think it's every 5 years.
So this is basically a renewal.
Basically a renewal of what we currently have.
Council, public?
Charles Arthur Soul, 135 Bartlett Street. What is the cost involved in doing this?
Yeah, it's not a significant amount. I don't remember the exact, but I can send that out.
What would be a significant number for you?
I'm thinking it's less than $500.
Good, thank you much.
Anyone else? Council, call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 to 0.
Agenda item number 9.
Item number 9, resolve extending the term of the Ad hoc Advisory Committee on Rental Registration. Requested action to approve the resolve extending the term of the Ad hoc Advisory Committee on Rental Registration.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Cloutier, seconded by Councilor Beam. Any comments, questions from the council? Public?
Charles Soul, 135 Bartlett Street, Lewiston, Maine. Would you give us a detail of what this registration fee is? Because I know it was discussed some months ago.
At this point, there has not been a specific recommendation coming forward. That's one of the things that the committee is still working on. And the committee provided an interim report that indicated that they would not recommend the original program that was recommended back in May, I believe it was. But since then, they made a series of other recommendations aimed at trying to improve the condition of multifamily housing stock in the community. They broke into 3 subcommittees to try to refine those recommendations. One was police, working on the disorderly property ordinance. The second was fire and code, to try to coordinate their efforts better. And the third was the group that was working on rental registration. That group made a full presentation at the last meeting. There was a lot of discussion. That program is being revised and modified significantly to go back to the committee at its meeting the end of this month, with the hopes that they'll come to an agreement on how to proceed and that will come to the council. It is not clear that there will be a registration fee for the program. That's something that the committee will probably decide at its next meeting.
I just had another question, Mr. Barrett. We, in the past, but perhaps it was in May, that we're discussing that people wanted to add an apartment to their home for their ailing relatives. Would that be included as to a rental fee as well?
No.
And why not? It's rental property.
Because I think the basic principle here is it's going to have to be 3 units or more. So we're not going to bother with duplexes or in-law apartments or things like that.
That seems to me to be a class distinction, one for one or all. Another thing is, if I recall right, it was a registration fee of $35, and you had 2 landlords fighting over it in the yard out here. One wanted and one didn't. You got to start thinking of what that's going to do for the cash-strapped renters in your inner city.
Mr. Sewell, appreciate the comments.
I appreciate it
Our
too.
rental registration meetings are open to the public.
Yeah.
And if you'd like the emails of those, we can send you
Well,
when
you know,
they are.
yeah.
They're on the 3rd floor. You
Right.
are welcome to attend and
Right.
opine as necessary, but
Okay, great.
we're talking
But-
about extending the committee, so.
Well, that's great, but I think if you're going to do a rental registration, I want my notification through the mail.
That's for the committee.
Well,
You can send me an email. I'll make sure you get the notifications.
I think I've been sending you a few.
Anyway. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 2?
No.
Ward 3?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6 to 1.
And reports and updates. Councilor Ray.
Got a lot of information. Thank you for bearing with me. At our February 11th meeting, we elected approved the candidacy of Mr. Todd Finn, who will become the new superintendent of schools for Lewiston Public Schools effective July 1st, 2019. We also had a very robust discussion of the high school grading policy and ended up voting to average 76 on all standards as a result of that very robust discussion and consideration. The Lewiston Education Association president also presented on her part-time release, which has really led to a lower level of grievance resolutions where she is able to work with those who are submitting grievances before they become bigger problems and move towards level 2, level 3, or arbitration resolution. She's also been working on new employee orientations and building relationships, which I think helps add to that grievance resolution at a lower level. We did not meet this week. It's February break for students, but we will be meeting on, I think it's February 25th, next Monday. We do have an agenda item to change the VPA Building Committee to the Lewiston High School Building Expansion and Improvement Committee, which I think addresses some questions that were raised here tonight about expanding the tax base and adding value through that project. We also have a student disciplinary hearing on, I think it's February 26th. I'm sorry, my dates are a little mixed up. And then finally, I let you know at the last meeting that I've been appointed to the Maine Education Policy Research Institute as a member, a representative of the Maine Municipal Association. We have our first meeting on March 1st. So if there's anything happening at the state level in regard to education that you have particular interest or questions about, please let me know before then so I can bring those forward. I'll also be asking the same of the school committee. Thanks.
Any other business? Councilor LaJoy.
In regards to 911 Subcommittee on the radio communication system, we'll be having an all-day meeting on the 28th of this month to review bids and other concerns that we may have with the appropriations of that equipment. So it'll be an all-day meeting, and I can bring you up to date after that.
Excellent. Any more reports and updates or a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Second. Second. All in favor?